Just a very brief introduction. So my name is Jelena. I come from Belgrade, and I have been working as a community builder with the RIPE NCC for about almost 2 years now. Some of you might remember me from many different events, but specifically from the last year's SC meeting in Ljubljana, where we had a lovely chat about the history of the internet in former Yugoslavia. That was a rather brief, but I would say a glorious moment for our former country. And this year we're going to continue that story from a slightly different angle, but still the idea is the same. I wanted to understand how we got here, how we got to this point, and well, how we ended up with the internet that we have now. First, I'm going to give you a historical overview of the last 3 decades of the telecom evolution of the telecom market, but we are also going to touch and discuss later during the panel about what the future holds for the internet in the Balkans. And this is a very pretty visualization of the timeline where when the national telecoms were formed, the first of these 3 parts, first decade in the 90s. I chose to start in the 90s because when we ended our story last year, it was with the breakup of the country in the first half of the 90s, and this is where we are starting again. And I just wanted to explain that the numbers, that the years that you see are the ones that where the telecoms were split, telecom services were split from the postal services. And I know that some of these telecoms do use different dates as their official founding years, but I chose this set just for the consistency's sake. And you can see that most of the countries are kind of grouped in the 90s with some differences on both sides. And when we move to the next decade, this is 2000s. And this was quite an eventful decade, and I would say a very important one for many different stakeholders. In my opinion, what was one of the key things that kickstarted the whole process of liberalization of the market and in some cases parallel privatization of the national assets was the fact that many of these countries have, by that point, have already started their process of the EU accession process. And that meant that they had to adopt EU regulations, EU standards, and those new regulations were introduced to promote competition, consumer protection, innovation, and many different things. Also important to note that EU also provided funding for to support the further development of the internet structure in the region. And as those markets started opening up, we saw the entrance of the new players. And very often, not very often, but typically these players, the result of that would be significant increase in the level of competition in the country. At the same time, countries saw increased foreign interest, foreign investment in many different sectors, but specifically in telecom sector as well. And this was quite important because these were, I would say, struggling transitional economies. So these type of contracts played a huge role when it comes to the general economy. And another thing that I wanted to highlight is that this is also the period where we started seeing the creation of the truly independent regulatory authorities across the region. So moving to the last decade, this is 2010s until now, I want to point out some of the characteristics of the current market, and in regard to the traditional telecommunication industry. Traditional telecoms are seeing the increased competition coming from many different directions, but the primary ones come from mobile virtual network operators and over-the-top services. And just very briefly, for the people who might not be familiar with these terms, mobile virtual network operators are the operators that typically do not own the physical infrastructure and don't have the spectrum usage rights, but they rather rely on the wireless networks of the mobile network operator that they have signed a contract with. And they get to set their own retail prices. And typically, they are targeting cost-concerned customers, or rather people who prefer to have their internet cheap, at a cheap price. And that's the reason why whenever we see the entrance of the virtual network operators, we also see a decrease in the retail prices over the years. So another challenger to the traditional telecoms comes from these OTT services that include, so those are the media services that these companies offer directly to the customers via internet, and those include television, messaging, and voice calling that are, again, we are typically used to get those from telecoms. So, right. So that also leads us to the next point, which is change of the way that we access and consume the internet. Because I think most people by now have dropped using their computers and have switched to smartphones and other mobile devices. And also what we consume is different. Just to give some examples of the endless Zoom calls, online video games, or streaming Netflix or similar media, that leads to a growing demand for the high-speed internet. And telecom companies are in constant struggle to offer better and better services, but at the same time to lower the prices, because this is the expectation. And they continuously need to invest more and more in the infrastructure, in the upgrade of the infrastructure, to be able to respond to the demand of the customers. Another change that is noticeable in this period is that regulators have started acting more like hawks of the telecom industry, with a very straight vision and a task to protect the customer needs. And all of these factors together are driving the telecom industry to consolidate. And I just wanted to point out some of the trends that we're going to, that I would say, that I see dominating the industry in the next decade. I think that telecom companies are going to continue to finding different methods to respond to these market pressures. And one of the ways that they can do that is by internally restructuring, converging services, doing different types of integration. But also another thing that has a high potential of disrupting the industry is of course, the expansion of the 5G. We will see how that works out in the region and if it's going to have its full potential. So, before I move to the next slide, so all of these market pressures have resulted in a market that is rather consolidated across the region, with the emergence of a few strong regional players. And this is how it looks on the map. The data that we used is from the APNIC, the market share, and partially my own research when deciding, not with deciding when, just mapping which ASNs belong to which network, and then which companies are a part of the same ownership group. And we chose these 4 because they're the largest ones. They're present, these companies are present in 4 or more SE countries. So that's just a very brief image, but if there's anybody who's interested in this, I also included tables with a bit more details that include the names of the companies and the year of the purchase or foundation. And yeah, and when we wanted to look inside of these ownership groups, the first thing that we across the whole region, it wouldn't be an NCC event if we didn't talk about IPv6. So this is and IP resources. So looking into these countries, we see that in examples of, I think you can see the examples of the Montenegro, Croatia, and what was it? And Greece as well. You can see that majority of the IPv4 resources do belong to one of these regional players. And we're going to, during the panel, we're going to discuss what kind of effect does that have on the internet. So bits of the technical analysis from the NCC side. So comparing these companies within these ownership or family groups, how we call them, we wanted to compare how do these companies, well, how interested or involved and how much effort they put into IPv6. And the first company that you are looking at now is A1, but across the whole region where they operate. And to me, what's interesting here is to see that when it comes to countries like Austria, you can see that they do have quite a high percentage of their network, that their IPv6 capabilities are quite high comparing to other countries like other countries in the region like Bulgaria and Croatia and Serbia especially, and Macedonia. And then we can just go through different companies and look at what the numbers show us. And again, here we see that Bulgaria and Greece are doing quite well when it comes to IPv6 capabilities. But then some other countries like Croatia and Montenegro are kind of lagging behind the group leaders. Similar patterns across Deutsche Telekom, where the German is the parent company, is the leader, and then you see the local subsidiaries again are lagging behind the leader. Vodafone, it's a slightly different case because what we would expect to see is the parent company, which is registered in the UK, is not really the leader of the country, of this group, but is rather Greece. And then when it comes to RPKI, again we can see the whole group and just a second. Yeah, so similar to IPv6, we see that Austria is again a leader of this group, and countries like Croatia are significantly lagging behind. When it comes to United Group, this is a pretty picture because we can see that all of these subsidiaries are doing quite well. which is not the case with Deutsche Telekom, where again, maybe you can see that Croatia is at 0%, and maybe I hope that you already were able to see the pattern when it comes to Croatia as a host country, that very often we do see very, very low numbers when it comes to RPKI by IPv6 as well. So there's definitely room for improvement. And then the next measurement that we did was to look at how do these subsidiaries in the region, these companies, actually connect to each other. And on the left side, you will see on the x-axis you will see these companies in question, and on the y-axis you will see the companies, the networks that they are, have significant dependency on. And often we would see tier 1 networks appearing there, but what is also interesting is that very often we would also notice the parent company popping up. So this is Deutsche Telekom, but I will show the examples for other countries as well. And when it comes to the blue cells, the stronger the color is, the stronger, the higher the dependency is. And this is based on the data snapshot from the 1st of January from the Internet Health Report AS hegemony scores. And on the right, this is the measurement that we did with RIPE Atlas, where we did a mesh measurement and to see again how do these networks communicate, and it pretty much confirms what we saw on the left side, where you can see, I hope that you can see, you will see the ASNs that belong to the networks in the region, but again in the mix you will notice that we have some of the tier 1s, so that means that a path from Deutsche Telekom company in Macedonia, which would be Makedonski Telekom, to some other company, for example, Croatian Telekom, it might happen that they go through the parent company or through one of the tier 1s. We don't really, so this is just what we are able to see using the RIPE Atlas, but it's almost never like a complete picture because we do lack probes, Atlas probes in the Neven network, and sometimes the trace routes are also incomplete. But to the best of our knowledge, this is how the connectivity inside the paths available inside of these companies within the Deutsche Telekom group look like. When it comes to Vodafone, it's a slightly different image. As you can see, it looks slightly bit more centralized, right? And you can see on the left side, the color on the top is very, very dark blue. And the network that you see is Vodafone Europe. And on the right side, again, you see a centralized image with the same network. So that just means that the company, Vodafone Europe, that AS is extremely important and that all of the other networks are highly dependent on them. When it comes to United Group, it seems that Serbian broadband is another network with significant importance and that many different networks do rely on them. A1, it's a mix comparing to Vodafone and United Group perhaps, but again we do see in the mix a lot of, not a lot, but a certain number of tier 1s. So the question is how come tier 1s do appear when it comes to these cross measurements. So I explained to you that we would love to have the full picture, but this is not always possible because we do lack atlas probes. And what we would like to have is to cover all of the larger significant networks so that whenever we want to repeat or redo these type of measurements, that we can do that. You can see here the AS numbers of the networks that we consider to be significant in the country, and where doing this type of measurements would make a lot of difference if we had a probe. So if anyone who is in the room or is following remotely is interested in hosting a probe, you can write to our team or myself. And I also have 10 probes, physical probes with me, hardware ones. So if there's anyone who is interested, you can just find me and I will give you a probe. So any questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Urban Sohodolnik, I'm a student at TU Graz, but I'm speaking for myself. I would like to ask how IPv6 capability was measured, as things that actually have IPv6 and use it, or as capability in the infrastructure that might be or might not be activated?
I think it was IPv6 capability. It was the data from the APNIC.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's better then. Thank you.
Yes, hello, Hisham Ibrahim, RIPE NCC. To address that a little bit more, so what APNIC does is they run measurements using Google Ads, and the assumption is that human beings will use Google. So if they can fetch information using IPv6, then the end user is capable with IPv6. And they take large samples, and they use that data to make the assumptions, is IPv6 going all the way to the end user or not? Yeah, thanks. It's IPv6 in use all the way to the end user. Yeah.
So the first question for for everybody on the panel would be, so how would you describe the current telecommunication market in our region?
Who shall go first?
Upaljam, yeah. Maybe after all these years from the beginning of the liberalization of telecom markets, yes, you mentioned we have 3 big players in Croatia. Yeah. It depends what count of you are looking for. So we are small markets, yeah. We are less than 4 million citizens, but we can say we have few regional operators, little one. Today, after all these years, today when we are talking about telecommunication, we can say that we have 2 markets. Now we have digital markets and connectivity markets. So from my point of view, digital markets is something very important because convergence happened. So digital markets without telecom, we can say connectivity is very closed and can't stand alone. So focus is now on the trends, we can say, because European Commission and all Union recognize that. That's why they published this debate regarding future of telecom trends in the next decade. So we can say that it's ICT markets, that's something we have to be focused, and that's very big challenge for all us from the telecom sectors. It's obviously that we all have to have sustainable, reliable, and secure networks. That's why European Commission wrote all these regulatory acts regarding cybersecurity, regarding digital services, DSA, DMA, and regarding security, the last one is NIS2. So it will be a big challenge in implementation of these acts. So big, we can say, challenge for regulators, for policymakers, and for private sector, ISPs, and digital provider. Yeah. You want to?
Okay, I will continue with a point of view from Romania. So in Romania, there are 4 big players. What it is also important is that in the 1990s, I would say 92, 93, there were over 8,000 micro and mini operators in Romania, and now there are less than 500. So I would say that this is basically, these are bad times for small operators. And I think I will stop here.
I think this is a perfect lead to maybe to hear from Neven as a representative of the smaller operator. Can we say that?
Thank you, Jelena, and thank you for the invitation for this forum. I think it's very important that we get together and discuss these things. So, yes, this is a very interesting topic, and I will start with a little bit of going back. You know, my colleague there from Romania was giving out some numbers. It was close to 30 years ago that, you know, the internet industry really started, you know, both in Romania, in Bulgaria, and in the other countries around here. And you know, during those years, the first 10 years maybe, we had, it is true, it's absolutely true, there were thousands of small, you know, small ISPs and operators that were operating, and I don't think that anybody from the population was complaining that there are too many. I think that everybody was happy that they have a choice, that they have a good service, and Romania and Bulgaria, for that matter, were regularly in the top 5 in some cases, not even top 10, of the annual State of the Internet report that that I was, you know, following, and that Amazon was publishing, you know, very regularly. That they stopped publishing that from one point, by the way. So what happened, you know, after those years? The consolidation and the mergers and acquisition and all this process in the region has taken a very different, has created a very different view of the market. We have a similar situation here. We have maybe similar number of small and medium-sized operators left, you know, less than a few hundred, and we also have three or four major operators. We have like 10 or 15 other that are medium-sized, and that's it. Bulgaria has dropped from any global ranks in terms of good internet versus quality. I mean, quality of internet versus prices. We're far away from the best countries in the world already. And the question is that a problem or is it not a problem? I will let's state it from the point of view of is that a problematic process from a point of view of the law? And the answer is very simple. This is not illegal. It's not illegal to have mergers. It's not illegal to have acquisitions. The process that's happening in all these countries is quite normal from an economic point of view. How does that look from a standpoint of view of the regulators? That's an interesting point. The national regulators, in my view, very often do not have the necessary capacity, simply the capacity, not even the willingness, but they don't have the capacity of analyzing and preparing high quality and reports, high quality analysis of the competitiveness of the markets, their situation, the prospects and everything. And they very often rely on the European Commission and on the global, not global, the European Commission as an institution and the BEREC as a regulator in order to draw conclusions and plan their decisions. And for one or another reason, I think that the European Union in general and the European Commission in particular have much bigger problems to solve in the past, had much bigger problems to solve in the past 10 years, 10, 15 years, than the telecommunications industry. Unfortunately, I would say for us in this industry, we started off with having very, very good services everywhere, or in most places in Europe, including in the Balkans, which for the regulators was a very strong signal that they don't have to do much about it, and they let it go, the way it is, the way it should just, naturally develop, and it happened what happened. I have to say that I don't see any prospect of that changing in the near future. We have a war that is right next to our door, and we have a very unpleasant political processes in many of our countries. This is not going to change. So from a regulator point of view, everything is fine and dandy. We're all happy. Customers have what they want. The prices are not too expensive. Let's go and have another IKEA and be happy. But let's look at from a standpoint of view of the consumers, and I would dare say that this is the most important point of view. Now, we are all saying that in our countries we have two or three, like three or in some cases four major operators that control, in some cases, 80% of the market in some of the countries and some of the segments. Like, for example, in Bulgaria, this is the segment of bundle services that include mobile service. Clearly, only the mobile operators can have such bundle because only them, only they can provide mobile services, and the regulators would say that the competition is good enough. And I have a very interesting, I have a very simple question for that. If you go to France, for example, and ask them, would you be happy if there's only 3 suppliers of cheese in the whole of France, or if you think that it's okay to have only 2 suppliers of wine in the whole of Germany, would that be considered acceptable? I would expect that to be unacceptable for 90% of the population. But because of the good history of the telecommunication industry, we can accept that it's been good. It's been so nice in the past. So it cannot get so bad. But is it really the case? I can tell you that in Sofia alone, there used to be tens, not hundreds, maybe, but close to 100 maybe, just in Sofia, small and medium size ISPs and cable TV companies, My company Neterra was actually relying on that market because we needed to have reliable and cost-effective access to to all locations in the whole country, for that matter, but in Sofia in particular. And in the past 5 years, we discovered that this is not the case anymore. Not only is not the case, there's almost none small and medium-sized operators in Sofia left. So we were basically forced to build our own fiber network inside Sofia, which was the first new independent fiber network built here for the past maybe 10 years, and actually more, because nobody needed such thing, before. And now, when there is, it's just the handful, less than a handful of big operators offering services that are obviously very aggressive and don't want to let anybody else work there, it kind of becomes important. There are hundreds and thousands of complaints in the Commission for the Protection of Consumers in Bulgaria from the large telecom operators, because being aggressive and trying to make increase their profit and their ARPU and all that stuff, which is all completely legal, by the way. I always say that being greedy is not illegal. If somebody lets you, eat the cake, you're not guilty of eating the cake. That's a Bulgarian saying, by the way. And that there is not much that they can do, because the only force that can improve the services on the market is not giving more to the big operators, but increasing the competition. And this is a ongoing battle, I think, and it's not going to end anytime soon.
And I think this is a perfect opportunity to hear directly from a regulatory agency. How do you assess this or respond to the claims of lack of capacity of the agency to deal with these market dynamics?
Sorry, I didn't understand very well because of the connection, but I heard something about regulatory issues, and that you don't agree with the dynamics of the regulatory actions. It's not timely and
it is different in the different countries, I have to say, but in general, I'm also the chairman of the board of directors of the European Competitive Telecom Association. This is the association of alternative operators on a European level, and one of the strongest voices that supports competition on a European level. And what we see on a very high level is that it is really complicated. Like, for example, any market analysis, any action that a regulator may take to amend or to help a certain market has to go through a very detailed market analysis. And the methodology of doing a market analysis is such that you may need to spend between 2 and 3 and sometimes even more years just to be sure that you are doing the right stuff, you're collecting the right information, so that when it goes to real market activities, like regulatory activities, it's not going to be overturned in the court when the operators, for example, the big operators complain in the court and they bring up all their, their lobbying efforts and, their marketing budgets, behind them, and their promises of large investments and all that stuff. It's very difficult. That's what I'm saying. So it's not easy. This is my point.
I'm not aware about situation in Bulgaria, but from my experience, we usually have these ex-ante regulations And according to that, I think for regulator is the most important to have fair, proportional, and timely action. So we used to do it. Acquisition happened in Croatia, and maybe something wasn't so well, but we have about 5 regional operators. They made their niche in regional access. I don't know, for example, deployment of the fiber on just one county and some business model. And we have 3 big operators. They are rolling out today currently. They have some obligation regarding 5G coverage. Currently, we have, if we want something to make obligatory for them, we have only 2 wholesale products. So with symmetric regulation, I think the things have to be right regarding competition. So that's my point of,
But I do have a question on what kind of methodology do you use at HAKOM to assess each case of a merger and acquisition that is brought on your table?
Particularly in that situation, we don't have power regarding that, because another regulator, competition regulator, is in charge for that. We just send our opinion in that procedure, and we looking deeply in the revenue share on the market, on that particular market, and send our opinion to the competition regulatory. And usually they are judged about that acquisition. So that's the procedure here.
Okay, but is it possible to tell us a bit more detail on how do you form that opinion?
How
do you form that official opinion that you then forward to the other regulatory agency?
Based on the statistics from the end users, for example, customers base, revenues, and regarding some competitions practice from the competition law.
And in some cases, have you had a case where you had to put certain conditions for that merger or acquisition to go through?
Sorry, can you repeat?
Do you sometimes take a case, a very specific case of acquisition, and then say, we can allow this, but under very specific conditions?
We can't say that we can allow it or not. We just have our expert to the competition authority.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that what Jelena was asking was how many, can you give us any cases when you actually recommended not to be approved, a certain merger, for example, or acquisition to be approved, or how many cases you have issued an ex ante regulation to be implemented, by the operators?
How many cases we approved? We don't.
How many have you recommended not to be approved?
Not approved. For example, on the beginning, when HT want to buy first ISPs in Croatia, ISKON, we didn't approve that, and we sent our opinion to the competition authority. But in that time, it was prescribed by the competition law some threshold. So they were under that threshold, so regulatory competition agency approved that. We were against that.
Thank you. Thank you.
And sorry to keep you waiting. Slobodan, do you want to chime in with your perspective from Serbia? How do you see the market in Serbia in regards to the conversations that we had so far?
Thank you, and hello everybody from, believe it or not, snowy Belgrade. It's April, and it feels like, you know, middle of winter. So I kind of envy you, you know, the seaside. You know, with regards to what's been happening in the telecom market in Serbia, you know, the past 10 years were marked by a really explosive growth of mobile internet use. And it was powered by 4G and the rise of, you know, what the incumbents call the OTT services. In the first part of the decade, actually this demand was being met on the part of the infrastructure by the cable operators. So they were investing a lot in fast internet, and Telecom Serbia, which is the incumbent, was really lagging until maybe 6 or 7 years ago, when they started heavily investing in fiber optics. So this picture changed a bit in the previous couple of previous years with this rise of a fiber optic by Telecom Serbia. Of course, you know, the other cable operators also started, you know, rolling out mostly, you know, hybrid coaxial fiber optic infrastructures. So we have seen, you know, developments in that part as well. But, you know, Telecom Serbia really changed this picture in the recent years. And this combined, you know, fiber, cable, and mobile infrastructure, and of course, in some places where, you know, this modern infrastructure doesn't exist, we still have, you know, like the old copper and VDSL. All of this provides, you know, like a decent coverage, I would say, at a relatively affordable prices in most areas. But I would say that the biggest problem is actually user choice in many areas. It really doesn't exist in many places. So despite the fact that you have, you know, on paper and in statistics, many operators, you really sometimes really don't have a choice, and you have to stick with, you know, one operator. I think that this situation should be monitored much more closely by the regulators, and it is not easy, really. The operators really need to collect a lot of data from many sources on the availability of services and the quality of services in different areas. But it really provides a better picture, I think, and insights, and of course input to the government where state intervention might be needed, for instance, with regards to rollout of the new infrastructure. We have also seen some consolidation in the cable market and some in the ISP market, mostly again by Telecom Serbia in recent years. They really wanted to regain their position in bundled services over fiber and cable, and they also invested a lot in content, you know, buying rights for major sports events and producing TV shows. I see that this shopping spree ended approximately a year ago, but really we haven't seen a major new entrance in the market, which is I think interesting. And the market is, generally speaking, still very much concentrated in most segments. So you can see in most segments just you know, a few big players like Telecom Serbia, Serbia Broadband, and in the mobile you have A1 and Yetel. This is former Telenor. The Competition Protection Authority didn't pay too much attention to all of this. So we were left with a Serbian Agency for Telecommunications, which applies these like ex-ante activities, but they were, again, in my point of view, not too effective in ensuring fair competition. And I mean, I can't say that they didn't do anything, but they could have done much more to ensure better conditions for alternative operators, infrastructure access, infrastructure sharing. And I mean, of course, they still can and they still should. So I would encourage them to dedicate themselves more to this. And you know, I don't want to talk more, you know, about too much about consumer protection, and it's a whole different topic. But I just want to mention the universal service provision, which wasn't that good over the past 10 years in Serbia, and it was the law, for instance, was never implemented to the full extent in this area, and this mapping, which I mentioned, lagged for many years, but it was eventually done. And preparation to get to ensure, state funding for covering these like white areas also took some time. So this whole rural broadband project is just starting. And I think it's great that it is starting, but it took really a long time. And looking forward, I think that it's obvious that Serbia is lagging behind in 5G. We still haven't got the auction for frequencies, and also the overall legislation is also a bit dated. The existing law on electronic communication is more than 12 years old now. So I think that these things are urgently needed, and I hope that this year we'll see both the new law and the auction. Of course, demand is still strong and going strong. Video is there, of course, and more users are using, government digital services, e-commerce, and I don't know, entertainment. And of course, this whole new wave of generative AI applications and virtual reality and augmented reality will also contribute to this growing demand. So this is why we not only need better mobile infrastructure and new generation networks, but also improve legislation, because if you want to take advantage of the 5G networks, you need to have much better legislation for laying down, putting base stations or laying down infrastructure, to streamline this in legislation. So we'll have to do a lot more. And my general point for all of this introductory part is that you really cannot have one single thing that you should do to make things better. It's there's a lot to be done in many areas, and many fronts by both, the government and the regulators, and eventually the market. And the sooner and the more is done, the better in general. So that would be all for starters.
I have a follow-up question for you. I hope you won't mind, but how would you assess the rivalry between these dominant players in Serbia, but maybe you can also give us the regional perspective? Do you see that these companies keep a close tab of what their competitors are doing and trying to keep up with them?
Well, yes, to a large extent. And some operators are, quicker in introducing some services than the others, and then the others follow up. So at some point, a couple of years back, when A1, for instance, introduced good tariffs for some zero-rated services, and generally bigger internet packages within their offering, it was quickly adopted by the other operators as well. So the things are changing, but this whole dynamic is limited when you have just the 3 players. So perhaps this 5G auction could be an opportunity to open doors to more competition. For instance, the United Group applied, expressed the willingness to run an auction for 5G frequencies in Serbia, and I think that they should be allowed to do that. I don't know whether they are going to stick to their commitment, but it's really tough. You're left with a limited number of players, and it's an uphill battle, I would say. So this is why I say that the regulators should focus more on the users, and empathize with them, basically, and not only rely on statistics and rely on some regulatory possibilities, like say, okay, we have like a growth in our telecommunications sector, and the user have the right to change their operator and retain mobile number, for instance, while effectively you don't have the possibility in your neighborhood to switch operators, for instance. So I think that this this user experience should be followed more closely, and regulatory measures should stem from these insights.
Thank you. And speaking of 5G, I'm very curious to hear from our panelists, how did the auction go in your country, if it was finished?
We just recently finished our auction, the rest of the frequencies. A year ago, we assigned some frequencies, and last month we assigned the rest of this. And it was very, we can say, very successful auction, because we earned for the budget, the state budget, about 340 million euros. It's double that we expected. There is some regional new player, on the auction. I think Eolo, some Italian company for some few counties on the seaside. And we have some expectations regarding rollout of 5G in the future, because we are not satisfied with some rural coverage, so we expect that they will cover that some kind of counties, and in combined with some fiber deployments, further deployments, with EU funds. I think that's the good direction, and we will see what will happen in a few years. We have all very expectation regarding this new services, new vertical slicing, and all that possibilities for the new players. Maybe some industries, completely different industry players in this, but we will see what will happen.
And was this decision to allocate these frequencies on the county level instead of the national level, did that take into account that by doing that you might attract more of the new players? How did you, do you know how was that decision made? And is that typical or atypical to award licenses on the county level instead of, the whole country?
I'm not expert in radio communication on all these procedures, but I noticed that they set conditions in direction that we can stronger competition. So we will have, we hope so, new regional players for 5G frequencies, but we will see what will happen in the near future.
Okay. So can you tell us more about Romania?
What I can tell you about Romania, I think it's something that could apply to all these Balkan countries. I'm going to take this hat off, and I put the hat of the small operator and not a board member of any kind of thing. Basically, what I'm doing, I'm fighting with toothpicks against Javelin missiles. I don't have money to go on TV. Whenever I want to link an end user living in a house with a 10 euro monthly payment, I have to pay 9 euros for the 30 meters fiber link, and from those 9 euros, 7 go to the city hall. So basically, it's like paying an indirect tax to the city hall, and I don't understand why. Is this something wrong to live in a big city, so you have to pay even for the air you breathe or for 30 meters of underground fiber? I think that, and I'm not asking for a different treatment, but an equal treatment is not a fair one from the regulator. Because the regulator is asking every year around 200 pieces of papers with hundreds of check marks about 5G, about 3G, about I don't know how many G points that I do not use. It takes me 1 week just to say no, 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 because I am not delivering these kind of services. What I would like and what I would consider a fair treatment, just send me the damn paper, half of it, with the services I am providing. Because you already know, as a regulator, what services I am providing. You are asking me for this. So it's like, I just love the cheese one. I am producing camembert, and you are sending me a paper asking me to say that I am not providing brie. But I'm not, but you already know. Why do you ask me again and again and again? So, it is impossible and it is not normal for any kind of agency, a private or governmental one, to make differences between operators. But what you can do is to find the fair point. Ask people whatever they provide. Don't go and make them dig big holes with lots of paperwork, especially when we are talking about micro operators. Micro operators have only one employee, who is the factotum. He is doing business management. He is managing the company. He is working on switches, routers. He's answering the phones. He's billing. Basically, he's doing everything. What the regulator does, he just doubles the work for nothing, without any impact, because you are talking, how do you find your answers? Via statistics. But when you have an operator, a micro operator, I mean an operator with 200 clients, he just makes a living for himself and his family. This is 0.01% of that statistic. He just doesn't count in the big equation. And if you multiply by 100, you will reach 1%, which doesn't count. What counts are those four big players. What I want to say is that, in my opinion, the regulator should keep a healthy system, meaning the regulator, like a doctor, should say, you shall take 1 shower a day, not 10, because you will destroy all the bacteria, including the good one. What the regulator is doing now, he is saying you shall take 100 showers a day to have a very, very effective system, which kills the good bacteria, in my opinion, the micro operators. So this is what I think that happens. I'm just asking one question. When there will be 3 operators and none of these small ones, what stops those 3 operators to add a leading 0 to the bill they are sending to their clients? Nothing. And as this is a contractual thing, the regulator won't be able to say anything. Opinion about Romania. Thank you.
So if I got right, you said that the problem are at the same time under-regulation and over-bureaucratic.
Exactly.
Okay.
And not only this, but I am trying to state only the most important factors.
Yeah.
I said that I will stop here because I want to state only the most important factors and not going into details.
Thank you. I would like to hear from Neven. The question that I asked a few minutes ago was about the 5G auctions, and maybe you want to share the updates from the Bulgarian side. How did the auction go?
Yeah, thank you, Jelena. The short answer, from a standpoint of view of a market effect, like effect to the consumers, I would dare say that in any of these countries, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how the 5G auction went, because this auction is not going to, and wherever it happened already, like in Bulgaria, it did not change the competitiveness of the market and the landscape, the options for choice for the consumers. No, it did not. So it doesn't matter how it went from that point of view. Having said that, the experience in Bulgaria is quite different. Just for it's almost like a joke because it's so different. It's very eye-opening what I just heard from the Hungarian regulator. Sorry, I'm sorry about that. The Croatian the Croatian regulator, because it's contrary to what happened in Bulgaria. In Bulgaria, the regulator has taken the approach that the frequencies and the mobile operators should not be charged a lot, because the logic is if they pay a lot of money for frequencies, they will be asking then the end users to pay that money back, right? So the consumer will be finally punished for the high fees that the state is asking them to pay. So let's see what happened in Bulgaria following this logic. There was a procedure last year for 5G frequencies. Before the procedure, there was more than a year of a public consultation where the regulator, the telecom regulator in Bulgaria, quite different from the regulator in Croatia, worked very hard to prove that there is a necessity to lower the fees for the frequencies. The procedure was held 1 week before a new law was introduced that was supposed to make it a bit more difficult, slightly more difficult for them to do what they did. And the mobile operators paid a total of, I think, let me read, 6.5, if I'm not wrong, million euro in total, all of them, for the next 20 years to use the 5G frequencies. You can compare to what this nice lady over there told us about Croatia. So you may think that this approach made them very happy. They decided to lower the prices, so the consumers were also happy. No, they did exactly the opposite. At the end of last year, all mobile operators, in a concerted effort, increased their fees by 15%, citing all kinds of reasons, with inflation and stuff. So the result was the opposite. So what would you think the regulator did next? Well, they just came up with a new decision to lower the prices of the further frequencies that they're supposed to be getting between 40 and 70%. So the next batch of frequencies they're going to get is going to be even cheaper. So this is the Bulgarian experience. Having said that, one of the organizations that I participate in, we complained to the courts for certain discrepancies in the procedure. Namely, we went to the courts and said, this is not the right approach. Giving away free frequencies or almost free frequencies to a small number of operators does not help the competition on the market. What would actually help it if the regulator would say, yes, great, we're giving you these frequencies, almost free of charge, but we would require you to open up your networks so that virtual mobile network operators, MVNOs, could show up and start offering more services. There is a more diverse market then, with more options for consumers and so on and so on. And we claimed that that this is the right approach. The approach is not to invite more operators to, because on paper those tenders are open. So anybody, like 2 or 3, maybe more operators can show up and say, I want to build another network here and then compete with the rest of the mobile operators. This does not happen because in a small market like Bulgaria, and all of our countries are not very big, it doesn't make any sense in building even 3 networks, if you ask me, but 4th and 5th, it's completely out of the question. So inviting more companies to build more networks, even for cheap frequencies, is not going to work. Quite on the opposite. If you want to help the competition, you should make sure that the existing networks are used better. And what I gave as an example is actually a very good example. Bulgaria is one of the few countries in the world that does not have MVNO operators, and that was our claim, to the courts. The court came up with a decision in our favor, not because of this logic that we came, but because of procedural reasons. And now the regulator is forced to do some changes. We will see what happened. They have already come up with a new decision yesterday, for that matter, that they insist there is no problem with competition on the Bulgarian market. I think this is severely flawed, logic, and it is what it is.
We do have a question from the audience.
Okay, thank you. Vladislav Dilkov speaking for himself, but interesting input on the Macedonian situation. We were lucky in the few years ago that our regulator was well equipped with the tools to keep the market running. But then something mysteriously broke. I don't know what happened, and things started to the famous Balkan way, 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. And 5G was a very not a good example on how things should be done. They did the licensing, the 2 big operators got their licenses, they're starting to develop their network, and interesting things happen. First, the quality of the general services which are not 5G is terrible, and each time you say something about it, it's, well, we are developing our 5G network now, this is why service is bad, and this is actually tolerated by the regulator. The second problem was that imagine after they developed the technology, the 5G is a premium you have to pay €2 to business customers in order to use 5G services, although you still have to have a 5G phone. On the other thing, some mergers created an unfair position in the frequency band, because there is one operator who has actually now double the frequencies and double the channels, even with 4G. And mysteriously they found a way, which is completely out of comment, that they are allowed to make this 4G allocation 5G without even paying or aligning it technically. So they are now in a position that they bought 5G bands, but also can use their old bands also in the 5G situation. At the end, the market is the biggest loser of this, because the services, the pricing went up, service quality went down, I don't know, internet included in your package was actually lowered, which was a very not compatible example on what we saw in the past for other technologies like FTTH, like building together infrastructure and copper access to things. So it's an interesting situation how somehow the regulator forgot its purpose, and although on your introductory presentation we saw that generally they developed independent and good capacity, sometimes this is lost, mainly because probably human capacity was lost in this regulator, and then it's difficult to continue from there. And now I will put my hat and inform you that there is a question from online, and I will ask our colleague from RIPE to put it into the queue.
So we have a question from Zoran Perovic. I apologize if I do spell incorrectly. Did the situation change for the better, and what each panelist think should have been done better? And this is the question for all. Thank you.
Is the question clear to everybody? Cristian, do you want to?
The situation is becoming better. No, it's not. As I said, dropping in 20 years from 8,000 operators to 500 is not a good sign. And in my own opinion, this will continue. People, when they are in a good situation, and I mean by this, I will state it, when there will be only 3 operators and they will feel comfortable, they will do what all of us are doing when we are feeling comfortable, meaning nothing, no evolution. The evolution is coming when you have a healthy competition. And the competition now in Romania, in my opinion, is unhealthy because unfair treatment. Thank you.
I have it. To say something about future in Croatia or in the EU level, because we can separate North Europe and South Europe. Yeah, when we're talking about some connectivity, we expecting better situation, because we expect that some EU funds and 5G also, we expect that we have better coverage, better connectivity. Regarding services, I think we are thinking about end customer's point of view. The most people, consumers want to have services, so somebody will survive. Content is services is the killer applications, so everybody needs more than 30 megabytes. We are talking about some gigabytes society to the end of the decade. That is something not so realistic, but more than 100 megabits is very realistic for each end user, so we are looking in that directions. And I hope regulatory offices and the race will be better, No bureaucracy. We didn't notice big complaints regarding bureaucracy in Croatia, so I'm not aware about that situation, because everything is online services regarding all some notifications and data for us. It's just few clicks on the mouse, that's all.
I do have a follow-up question. Croatia is part of the EU, but do you also, as an agency, as an authority, coordinate with other agencies in the region? Do you have that institutional cooperation?
The usual practice is BEREC working groups, so each country participates in BEREC, and we are trying through that groups have common position, harmonized position, but sometimes it's so difficult because we have different national situations. We notice today in Romania and Bulgaria, but some common principles have to be here. For example, I don't know, currently we are working on common position regarding this debate about fair distributions on the EU level. So I think BEREC will come with a unique opinion regarding this European Commission debate. So I think maybe it will be much better in the future, yeah. What we can do else, yeah.
I was especially curious because we are seeing the same companies and the same players in the many countries of the region. And I was just curious from their own perspective, if you do operate in 5 different countries, is the regulation consistent? And how do you actually, does it make it easier or more difficult to have such a structure?
We don't have daily cooperation with some NRAs in other countries. Just I mentioned we have cooperation through this working group in BEREC, but we are open for each, I don't know, questions, issues from another countries. For example, when we're working on some important issue, yeah, for the Croatia. For example, last year we have analysis regarding universal service obligation. We made bilateral meetings with Slovenian NRAs and Austrian NRAs. Sometimes in this, we can say projects, mini projects, each 1 or 2 years in period. But the regulatory frame is clear on the EU level. It's a point in implementation, I can say, because each country have own way of implementation.
I can also add something here.
Yes?
On a European level, just for the sake of clarity, there is an electronic communication code which is one for everybody in the European Union, but the regulation is country-based. The BEREC, which is the so-called regulator in the European Union, it's not, their decisions are not obligatory at all. They have a consultancy function. That's why the regulators in each country are making their own decisions for good or for bad. In our case, I think it's for bad. This is the situation, and it's not only the communication regulators, as properly noted by my colleague from Croatia. It is the competition authority. The competition protection commissions are very important in this sense, and when they do not do what they're supposed to be doing, it never works. It never happens. I mean, there are the methodology of researching the competitiveness of the market in the European experience and in the global experience is very well developed. So there are no secrets there. We're not going to discover some new KPI that nobody else has discovered in the world. But they have to be applied. The proper market analysis has to be applied. They can, instead of asking questions how, the Romanian market or the Bulgarian market, the prices are so cheap, so there is enough competition. No, this is not an answer. They could ask the question, how many different and independent offers can a consumer in the village of or in the city of whatever city can actually receive, and if it's only one, there is no competition. Or how many new providers of different and independent services have appeared last year. That would be a much stronger indication of a competitiveness of the market compared to some of the measures that they are currently using. And as I said, all of these things are there. They just have to use them. And what my colleague from Romania complained about the bureaucracy, this is usually, we have the same problem here in Bulgaria. This is usually an indication of a political unwillingness and a political decision on a high level to support the big operators. It's sometimes very clear that they even don't hide it sometimes. They're very open about it. While they could have a specific strategy for the support of small and medium size operators, like when they are the European Commission is having like those financing programs. They have special financing for large companies, and they have special financing for medium companies. They have special financing for small companies. They don't just say, okay, this is the money, whoever is the best, let's get it. Well, obviously, one company is going to get the whole thing. And this is lacking. This is lacking in all of the countries that I know around here. There is no focus on the medium and the small and medium-sized business, and the small and medium-sized business is the core of any economy. It's not the biggest operator. This is a very frequent fallacy. It's a misunderstanding.
And I would like to hear from our panel, because we are nearing the end. Oh, yes. So first, before that, we do have at least one question from the audience, so we will take that now.
Thank you. It's rather more like a comment. I'm from Romania, Florin Dragomir from ANCOM, from the regulator also. Perhaps just to share a bit of my views to complete the picture, at least for Romania. So we have big operators, we have small operators, we have more than 600 operators on the market right now. Yeah, it decreased, but we have more than Germany, we have more than France, we have more than Netherlands, and so on. In terms of, we have, as a regulator, you have several important goals. One of them is the price and the quality of the service for the end user. And right in this very sense, we should also, we should also take note that the prices for broadband communication services and the quality of the networks in this region, actually, Romania, Bulgaria, Serbia, are quite good. We are on the top list in Europe or even in the world. For the level of competition, yes, at some point there could be differences if you look at city level, if you look at some regional level, but let's remember, all of us, that we are applying the same EU rules in all EU member states, and there are also rules regarding the market analysis that we all apply, and this is how the situation is interpreted. Regarding problems related to some sort of bureaucracy, I should perhaps we should take note of the fact that the framework that we are applying, the electronic communications common framework at European level, tries to put very low barriers and sometimes actually makes also the regulator life quite difficult, in the sense that we have to ask again and again, because what you declare to us are perceived based on this code as intentions, not something that you have done already. You can start doing something more even without informing the regulator. This is these are the norms in the EU, and these are the norms that are implemented in all 27 countries. So, yeah, sometimes we have to ask again all 600 operators, not 20, some dozens like in Germany or in France, about services and networks. But this is how the European framework works, actually.
Can I say something?
Okay, no, I can stop here, and I think the colleague from Bulgaria has some comments.
Yeah, let me also jump in after Neven.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate your participation here. I didn't get your name, but you will tell me later from the regulator in Romania. You are absolutely right. There are a lot of positive things that we can be proud of. And the developments in the past few years is not one of them. And when you compare, I will use something else, because the number of the suppliers is not the best way to compare. There is something that is called the Digital Economy and Society Index in the European Union, the so-called DESI index. This is a comprehensive summary of indicators that show how each country is comparing to the others in the development of their digital economy, digital transformation, digital economy, how the population is using services, blah blah. And this is one of the best indicators of how the results of our industry is helping society. It's one of the best. And guess what? Looking at the latest DESI index, society index, Romania is on the third, starting from the back, and Bulgaria is the first, starting from the back. So how could we, being both countries in the top 5 in the world, just some years ago, ended up to be the last 3 in Europe? It's probably there is some reason for that.
Yes, there are. And actually, you are comparing 2 different things. If you look specifically in the DESI report, only on the metrics related to connectivity, you'll see that both Bulgaria and Romania are in the top class. What drags down both countries are the digitalization aspects, the alphabetization for the information technology usage of the people, and things like this. Unfortunately, this is where we, both our countries at least, but probably others, should double down the efforts to catch up with the rest of the Europe.
I agree. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can I answer Zoran's question?
Sorry?
Can I answer Zoran's question?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, I'm sure that he would tease me if I didn't provide my opinion on this. So generally speaking, things are improving. I mean, statistics are going up, the usage is going up, the traffic is going up, coverage is getting better, investments are implementing. We have a lot of fiber now. We didn't have that a couple of years back, and so looking in a wider context, things are not that bad, and the situation is of course much worse in some other parts of the world. But on the other hand, the market is still concentrated in a lot of segments, and competition and user choice are often limited in practice. And alternative operators keep on, repeating the same complaints. So I guess, that, I mean, I don't have the hard facts because I don't work at the regulator, but if they keep on, repeating the same complaints, it tells me that, not many things are changing. So, what could have been done better? I mean, some things on my wish list, is probably not realistic, but, one thing could be the privatization of the national incumbent. It would benefit both the operator, we're providing the operator with the ability to make sound business decisions and choices regardless of, let's say, non-market influences. And it would make it easier on the regulator as well to enforce the law. Of course, being more agile with legislation. We just cannot afford to not change our legislation in a decade. So I mean, it doesn't make sense. You know, if you take a look at the legislation, the universal service, you will find there dimensions of the dial-up. I mean, it doesn't make sense. A really important thing is not forgetting about building and retaining capacities within the regulator and the line ministry. You know, you just cannot afford to lose people and have people, leave the regulator or the ministry, because this makes a difference between being able to conduct some market research or change the legislation or execute, for instance, rural broadband project from the initial idea to 100% deployment in 5 to 7 years or 15 to 17 years. You know, it really makes a difference if you have capacities. And this is often overlooked in Serbia in particular. And I would say much more focus on the end user experience by the regulators and the government in general, meaning also more effective consumer protection. And as I said in my opening intervention, these are just some things that could have been better, and there's no single silver bullet to just do one thing and things will structurally change. I mean, it's the efforts of many players done over many years that can move the dial in the desired direction. So it's really a mix. But this was some things on my top list, so to speak.
And thank you. And we do have another question from the audience.
Yes, for the record, my name is Desiree Milosevic. I'm one of the co-chairs of the RIPE community working group, and the cooperation working group is a place for network operators, but also for regulators and governments to come together and to discuss future impact of new regulation. So with that, it strikes me that here we're talking about the future, about the diversity of the networks, the connections that are missing in rural areas, and the RIPE community has to make the response to this open consultation that EU is now looking to get answers. I think Ms. Gašpar mentioned the future debate about the future of EU infrastructure, and I think that includes all of us. So I would urge all our members to actually send their response to the questionnaire that you can find on EU's webpage, and the cooperation working group itself has taken upon ourselves a task to form a small task of volunteers who will be responding to some of these, and we'll be happy to share some of our inputs that this small task team is working on. We cannot, because we're not a telco, or many operators are not a telco, so they cannot actually answer probably 2/3 of this questionnaire as it's asking for deep data. But I think we're all concerned about the future of the network, and we should use this opportunity. The deadline is 19th of May to really send our messages and amplify it, because they're welcome to the countries outside of the EU region as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Des. Another question from the audience.
Hi, Brian Reiter from 5x9 Networks in Croatia. So when we're talking about the rural connectivity, basically we have an answer. It's controversial at best, so it's Starlink basically. So not just Starlink, but OneWeb, Blue Origin, companies that are said that will do the stuff that is Starlink doing today. So my question is, do you think that Starlink is a welcome addition to the competition, or it will squeeze the smaller operators still? And the second question is for regulators, how difficult it is to manage and to regulate such big global companies who don't operate on landline or mobile, but out in space. Thank you.
What was the first questions, please?
Is Starlink a welcome competition, or you think it will squeeze the smaller operators even still?
Welcome competition, yes, normally every competition is welcome, so it's depend, yeah, from situation to situation, but we can say that each competition is more than welcome, yeah.
But do you think it will have an effect? So the smaller operators, we're talking about the consolidation of the market, how there are less and less of these smaller operators. Do you think that maybe Starlink or OneWeb or whoever will be another of these major operators who will bring down the margins for the smaller operators? So we see a lot of smaller operators operating in the rural environments, so even with the EU funding and everything, but Starlink is coming out of the blue or out to the space, you know, and bringing high speeds, low latency, and basically being another big player in the market.
I think the existing regulation on the high level, on the symmetric regulation and the wholesale products is sufficient. So on the retail markets is, we can say, because we don't have regulation on retail markets, we have competition in itself. So if we have some distortion on the retail markets, in that situation we get competition agencies. So regulators have to put in force some appropriate, fair, proportional, symmetric regulation and wholesale regulation.
Thank you.
And the second question? Do you remember the second question? How difficult is your job regulating, right?
Yeah, how difficult
is difficult to regulate? There isn't, differentiation, bigger or smaller operator. There are rules, and they have to fulfill that rules. If not, we have, we can say, good legal frame, because we can put very big penalties, and that's the answer for the good, I can say, competition. Only if you have good legal act, legal frame for the big penalties.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe I can add a few more things. You mentioned the small local operators. You know, it's usually when there is a small local operator, the cost of providing the service, locally, is going to be much cheaper usually than what you pay for Starlink, both for the initial installation and for the monthly cost. So, to compete at the local level with the local ISPs and get them out of the job, the price of Starlink is going to have to, drop, I would say dramatically, but, maybe not dramatically, but significantly to what is now. But this service has a value, in places where you actually don't have any local operators, in the remote areas, and also for some nomadic purposes. So if I was, the regulator, I would really welcome this means of providing services and covering areas in which you just don't have any option.
Thank you. And before we move to the closing round, I would, yes, we have time for another question.
Hello. I don't have a question, actually. I want to give you some information in order
Could you please introduce yourself?
My name is Ciprian Agoste. I'm from Romania. And I would like to add some data for you to have an even better image for the market in Romania. So there are about 500 or 600 companies with registered as ISPs, but the first four companies have a market share of 95% of the market, and the first one is more than 70%. So this is a competition in Romania. Thank you.
First one, more than 70%, that's what you said?
Yes.
Can you confirm that?
Yes, I can confirm, and I am very curious when there will be only 4 operators, all those hundreds of employees of the regulator, what will they do with 4 operators? Thank you.
Do you want to comment on that?
No, I'm talking about our regulator.
Okay.
Should I respond?
Please.
Yeah, looks like it's a Romanian affair, this discussion. Somehow.
Latin blood.
Yeah. What can I say? Well, first of all, perhaps we should learn who is this famous 70% operator. Actually, it was a newcomer when the liberalization came. It's not the incumbent. It's not any of the big operators. It's not Orange, it's not Telecom, it's not Vodafone. It's a Romanian company who started from scratch, from zero, in 2003, and now holds 70% and is also providing services in other countries in Europe. He's recently expanding his foothold in Spain and Italy. So, how does he do it? Well, he was a very big company, a very small company like you, like the companies in InterLAN and that are presented here in this meeting, and just was very aggressive on the market, so to speak. Saw his best interests and profited on the liberalization of the market. Obviously, at the beginning, had a hard time with the incumbent, but he managed to solve this problem. So again, my question would be, how come in this situation we still have one of the lowest prices on the market for internet service? That's a very strong point in front of the regulator. I mean, you have to admit this. Thank you.
You want to respond?
Yeah. I will just answer this, and what I would like is not a debate, but it would be very interesting to have a later meeting for bigger details. So, from what I know, and I may be wrong, the market in the 90s was quite the opposite as the one that it is today. The micro and mini operators had more than 50% of share of the market. This was the times where big speeds and small prices started. I remember, because I was there, I was operating, I was with cables, so I was directly involved in this. The big operators didn't have almost any chance, so they had to adapt by lowering prices and giving more and more bandwidth to the end users. And then one of the things that happened, they started to buy a little bit small operators, because it is true that it is very hard to keep up with giving everything for nothing. Things changed. Not everybody has the same goal in life. Like, though that big operator wanted to be a big operator, but there are several hundred others that just want a living for them, their families, and the families of their employees. They are not going into space, or not even in the next county. I'm not talking of the next country. So we have to take this also into considerations when we are comparing companies. Some like the big fortunes, some don't. And apparently one of those who liked that big company succeeded in becoming the leading operator in Romania. Thank you.
No follow-up questions? I would use the opportunity I would like to hear from other people in the audience, from other parts of the SEU region. Maybe if we have somebody from Slovenia, or Montenegro, Albania, or even people who are watching us online. I would like to hear from you to get your contribution to the discussion, or maybe you have some questions for the panelists. Is there anyone here that would like to say something? Yes?
Okay, could I just go to my laptop to show some results, because about this index is very, important. So I'm Paula Miušković from Montenegro, it's a regulatory agency. So regarding this DES index, which all we can compare, it's very easy. So when you look Montenegro, we look the broadband connectivity. So Montenegro is 10.4. The average for Europe is 15. For the Western Balkan country, it's 7.5, so we are the highest in the broadband connectivity. And when you take how you calculate the broadband connectivity, it's a result from 2022. It's calculated on the data for 2021. In 21, we didn't have like a 5G. So because for 5G, for the spectrum and populated areas coverage, we get a 0. If we add this, probably we will come very close to the European average. So right now, we had the 5G, it's covered about 75% of the population. And we also did the auction in 5G. So we sell the spectrum 700 megahertz and 3.6 megahertz. We have like 3 main mobile operators. The spectrum evenly divide. So in all this area, we have almost always increased the number of the traffic is increased, the number of customers increased. We have, let's say, a good result. So also we are good in this other part of the index. In the DESI indexes, except the part of the digital public services. This is where we are low. So. So let's say if you go with the incumbent, also I have this data because of this. I took the laptop even in the fixed let's say network, in the fixed telephony. Usually you expect to be the incumbent, the dominant. It's 53%. The second one is 37%. So the market is divided. We don't have, let's say, we have just not too many operators. We have like a fixed operator from the fixed telephony and 3 from the mobile telephony, and we have 12 internet service providers. But you can say it's 4 major one, and also we have the pretty good investment. Investments range from 20 to 50% of the revenue income of the market, and usually the income on the market, it's about 230 million. So I think we are doing good. So this is what we have.
Your general assessment is that Montenegro does have
yes, and just let me forget, we have like about 14% of the household. It's not in area of the broadband, and we divide this in the white, gray, and the black areas. And we need about 110 million to cover this. So also we are now in the second of the project. Right now we are making the tender documentation for the investment to cover this 14%. So just 14, just to be clear. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Slovenia, Albania, Greece. Okay, thank you all. And so I think we're going to move to the closing round now. And I would just like to hear from all the panelists, looking ahead, how do you see the future evolution of the market, and how do you see the role of both the regulator and the government in this process?
Well, I hope, what I hope is to have a dialogue, a real one, not based on, I mean, even regulations can be understood differently. They do in different countries, so people can, in fact, change opinions while respecting the law. I hope things will change for the better. Thank you.
I hope we will have faster reaction from regulatory offices, competition, telecom, ICT may be regulatory office in the near future, because we are talking about convergence and it's a big challenge for everybody to make fair, proportional and timely regulation, digital services and electronic communication services. Because we have to face it in the short time, and if we are talking about long term, about some gigabyte society, I just want to happen that each customer, each citizen have minimum 100 megabits in rural area, and that's the most important for the public.
By 2030.
Yeah, 2030. Okay. That's all for me.
Neven, maybe you want to go next?
I cannot see the future, so what I'm sure about is what I can do and what we can do. And I think that we should be very dedicated and very smart in working together, exchanging information and experiences, and working with our corresponding regulators and governments to make sure that the focus is always on the consumer. It's always on the competition, because this is the only force that can help the life of ordinary people.
Thank you. Slobodan?
Well, I've said it a couple of times during this session, but generally speaking, being more agile in legislation, building and retaining capacities within the regulator and the line ministries, focusing definitely more on users, and this means building capabilities for gathering data from multiple sources by the regulators, and of course being more effective in application of legislation, in enforcement of legislation. So, I mean, there is no one thing that is the most important. You really need to apply, multiple things over many years and work on different fronts to, see a tangible change. So, so that would be, my final words for this session.
Thank you, and thank you all. Big thank you to the panelists and everybody who stuck around until the end, and for the people who followed online as well. And I would say, just listening to this conversation, my big takeaway is that we definitely need to talk to each other way more than we did so far on many different levels. And the opportunity to do that is at the SE meeting. So please join us again next year. And we're looking for a host, so host country. So please, if you want to to provide a platform and to provide a space for us to continue having these important conversations, yes, get in touch with us, and you can be our next partner. Thank you.